I'm Jenny Ortiz-Bolivar here at Sigma Asia, and we are here at Inspire Entertainment Resort for Sigma Asia Land-Based Retreat. And with me, of course, is Harmen Brenninkmeijer, Managing Partner of NYCE International. Harmen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, now, it's interesting that we're having this discussion on camera because earlier, you've moderated a focused group discussion with all the other participants. Of course, we have, operators, regulators, manufacturers, and suppliers. What can you say about, I guess one of the things that stood out is, land-based versus online. Is that really should that be versus, or what do you think?
Okay, before I go there, allow me to say just a few words about, NYCE, because we basically try to bring the industry together. So that basically means we represent about 45 companies divided over the land-based and the iGaming sector, some in the lottery sector. But what we're trying to do is basically be a sales advisory organization that basically tries to find solutions to, let's say, occurring challenges that, let's say, either one or the other has. Now, what you see more and more now, and this is where it becomes very interesting, not just for my business, but in general, is that everything grew out of the land-based. And the land-based was extremely important to the economies in general, easier for the governments to understand and to regulate. Not easy in the sense of how to regulate, because that's a complex, matter on its own. But it was something that at least was very transparent, right? If you see an IR resort or you see a physical casino, you understand what you need to do. It is a little bit more a touch and feel, let's say. iGaming is very different. And in iGaming, technology rules, right? But at the same token, we have a lot of people coming into iGaming because the iGaming industry is becoming massive. So if we have, in the past, I used to use a statistic of about 10,000 land-based casinos. Now we probably have over 20, 30, 40,000, at minimum operators online. And it's probably a lot more than what I'm just stating. So we have no idea what the exact numbers are when we look at it, including the, unregulated side. If we talk about the regulated side, of course, it's much easier to comprehend, and we can talk about the number of thousands. What I think is happening is that governments really start often with regulating land-based.
Yeah.
Philippines was a good example. We started regulating the land-based side, and then they came up with a very interesting concept called PIGO, which basically meant that the land-based could now go online as well. So there is a mandatory requirement in the Philippines in order to have a land-based presence in order to go online. Now, most countries don't have that, right? You're either land-based or online, or you try to do both, but with under different licenses, different jurisdictions as such. What I think is very interesting is that when you mix it, there is a more comprehensive effect, let's say, that is also understandable for the regulators in order to control. And the side effects of it, from an economic perspective, I think are more understandable and of interest. And I think that's where the discussion this morning was leading to is, can in Asia the land-based side start driving also the regulatory, let's say, effect on the online side, because often that's not regulated in Asia. And I think that, everybody agreed that that would be, a good, let's say, way in for, let's say, the industry to, be more regulated than what it is today. Because right now, we only really have a good example in the Philippines. We have some examples of certain sports or certain, let's say, gaming activities within countries, and I mentioned sport because of the sports betting. But we don't really have, a comprehensive environment in Asia that basically says they really understand what they are doing versus what you see in Europe, United States, Latin America.
Yeah, and I guess, if I may add, in the Philippines, for example, we're seeing casinos or IRs also having online version of their, offerings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing about that is, of course, that, when people play a particular game, for example, in the land-based area, they want to play the same games online. So what happened is, for example, live slots. Live slots is not really taking off yet in the rest of the world. I think it will. But what is really important with live slots is the fact that they're actual slot machines being played, online via cameras, the same as you have live casinos, whereby you have a table game and you have dealers standing behind the table and then bets being taken from anywhere in the world, or depending on the regulatory environment, of course. But in the case of the Philippines, right now you will see that the live slots as such is becoming very strong for the Philippines itself. So that basically means people go to a land-based operation, they get used to particular games, they go online, play the same games, and continue as such. And, I believe that that's a model that I think a lot of countries will start to implement as well. But in the Philippines, it's more driven by the regulatory environment, and therefore, the operators are backing it very strongly.
Right, Harmen, I want to ask, do you think land-based, are there hesitations on their side to adapting online?
Well, I mean, we're talking 20 years in right now, and I imagined, that a lot of the land-based should already have been online, or at least have pushed for online, or at least have taken steps in order to go online. And only now do you really see that this is happening more strongly. So I think that now everybody understands there is less of a cannibalization than everybody was expecting. Everybody was afraid initially that, okay, if I'm land-based and I go online, then my customers are going to go more online. That's not going to be good for my land-based operation and the investments I made, etc. That is clearly not the case. Mm-hmm. Now, as I'm talking about the live slots, etc., why not tap into another stream of revenues from different types of players that are playing online? And I think, yes, you will see much more of that. And I think that it becomes mandatory for a lot of land-based people to go online.
Yeah, well, Harmen, you have decades of experience in the gaming sector. What can you say, especially in Asia, are the biggest developments now?
Well, as I mentioned, I honestly think that live slots is massive. Then I think, of course, you will see a number of IRs popping up in new countries, right? Thailand is, for example, going to be an example. I think that's going to be a very positive development. Japan, of course, when it finally gets off the ground. I think that you will see expansion in, for example, countries like Sri Lanka. Mm-hmm. I think that, Vietnam under new leadership will probably take, some measures, in a different direction. Don't know exactly which direction yet, because that's a bit unclear. I think that Indonesia is taking its own steps with regards to how to look at this business. We have no idea yet as to what will follow through all of that analysis that's being done behind the scenes, etc. But I think that everybody understands that this is not something that you can basically just put in a box and close. This is something that it's already happening. It's happening everywhere. It's large. Asia is by far the largest gaming market in the world. Now, how can we, deal more positively from a government perspective, regulatory perspective, and a player protection perspective with it?
Now, speaking of player protection, I want to, discuss responsible gaming and compliance. How important are these two for the continued growth of the industry?
I think it's really important to see a lot more compliance. I keep on saying this, and this is not something that I came up with, but that I learned at a very young age. Being in the gaming industry is a privilege. It's not a right. We are basically tapping in a human emotion and a human activity that, let's say, has been around forever. So now the question is, how do you deal with it responsibly? And responsibly basically means you just don't take too much from the people that cannot afford it. You make sure that you understand what goes through people's minds as they're playing. And with AI coming on board, etc., I think that you will see a lot of developments that basically make it possible to better control gaming. Now, what I always say is when gaming gets too big, okay, we've seen that in Russia when it suddenly got banned because it became too big. Or, for example, in Italy, where there are a lot of, regulatory actions being taken by the government to limit it. Or when you go to Australia, where, advertising is to be limited, etc., etc. I think that, we're always running behind the 8-ball. What we're trying to do as an industry is we're not looking at what we should be doing, which is basically anticipate what's going to happen. If we go too far, too deep, too fast, then the governments are going to stop us. And that's going to cost us much more than if we did it correctly and anticipated the potential effects. And, it is inevitable for everybody that's in the industry to take their responsibility and act accordingly.
If you can give, one tip for, our industry players watching right now, how can they, make sure that they're doing and promoting responsible gaming?
Well, first of all, I think that most of the people in the industry are very focused on the particular area that they're in. They're not looking at the holistic, views of, let's say, how they should be looking at the industry. So therefore, they're not necessarily taking the responsibility, totally. They leave it up to the compliance department. They leave it up to, let's say, the bosses. They leave it up to, let's say, other stakeholders within the environment, etc. I don't think that's good enough. I think that everybody needs to really look at it and basically say, I need to know more. How can I do so? That basically means personal education, but that also basically means like, I need to understand what's there and are we doing our best? I think that there should be some kind of a, let's say, blueprint for every operator to basically say, these are the actions that I'm taking. And I think that the regulator should basically say, okay, what are you doing about it? And if you do something about it, we will protect you. We will help you. We will make sure that, the rest of, let's say, the public, the stakeholders, the players, understand that you're a good operator. So it's almost like getting a stamp of approval or something like that. Just being regulated, to be honest, is not enough.
Right. Now, finally, I want to ask you, we're here at Sigma Asia Land-Based Retreat, and other leaders and movers from the land-based industry are present. What do you hope to take away from this, and what do you hope other participants will take away from this event as well?
Well, I think what's really important is that we have these very large industry events where, we have tens of thousands of people coming, as Sigma has proven with Sigma Asia, where 17,000 people were this year. And I think what's important is these smaller events that people get really, stronger relationships on a personal level, that there is more trust created and there is more of an exchange between each other in order to really get closer. Now, what I would like to see ultimately is that we do more of that on a, let's say, association level, create some activities that become more formal, in which we basically say, okay, what as an industry can we do as a whole? And the biggest problem I think that we all have is that there is so much information, but the information is not collected, in let's say central points, that as a result, you want to find positive information on gaming, you can. You find negative information on the gaming industry, you can. How can we as an industry defend what we're doing in a way that is extremely responsible and that is, somewhat future-proof, in other words, that can protect our businesses?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a challenge for the whole industry, right? Well, Harmen Brenninkmeijer, Managing Partner of NYCE International, thank you so much for your time.
Really appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to say my words. Thank you.